Welcome to Bear Care Corner. There's a sign. We're in our studio. Whoa, whoa. You'll never know which way to go, no matter how many times you do this. We'll introduce ourselves.
I knew it. I knew it.
We tried our best. Let's switch.
Yay.
My name's Andrea, the animal care manager, and this is
Nicole, senior animal caregiver.
Wow, I'm gonna go back because I gotta push the buttons. Welcome to Bear Care Corner. Today we are going to be talking about signs of illness and the residents, what to look for. I wouldn't say it's going to be completely comprehensive because that'll probably be a 5-hour video.
For sure.
But we're going to go through some of the different species and talk about what we would look for if there were any signs of illness, any signs of them being off, because they don't come up and tell us. They don't say, hey, something weird's happening. So we're going to go through a few of those. Thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions during the program, put them in the comments, and if we see them, we will answer them live. That's one of our favorite parts. Hi, Helen. Hi, Marilyn. Hi, Gail. Thank you so much for tuning in to Bear Care Corner and being part of the Bear Care Corner community.
Yes, very exciting.
We're live here in the main barn.
And I'll say this entire video was also inspired by someone's comment. It was our MedBox video a couple weeks ago.
And
I'm so sorry. I can't remember who left the comment, but somebody asked in the comments, how do you know if the residents are feeling unwell?
And we're like, hang on. Oh, it was the MedBox. I remember we're sitting there, we're both froze, and we're like, got so excited.
Oh my gosh, what a brilliant. We talked about it a little bit in that video.
Yeah, we got started.
Yeah, but we knew it's going to be a full
fascinating
episode.
topic. And one thing that people might not realize is the residents that we have here are prey animals. So they would hide their pain typically really well. And if they are not feeling well and showing it, they're actually doing quite poorly, especially the birds. So we want to catch that early.
Yes, it's very subtle cues. It's a lot of detective work.
Yes, we become little detectives. It's all about observations and noticing what's changed, what's different. It could be something physical. It could be something behavioral. It could be relationship-wise in terms of how they're relating with their flock or their herd. So we're going to go through a bunch of that stuff. I think we're going to go by species.
That makes sense.
Let's start with chickens.
Yes, excellent. You're just getting right into it?
Yeah, I was gonna bring a diagram of a chicken and go from like head to tail, but let's just
use our
start
imagination.
top of our heads. This is all the things. This is our mental toolkit we have as caregivers. It's something that we train new caregivers on, and it's something that we're always learning on the job and applying. Because there's so many instances of also just a gut feeling. That's very general into any resident. If you walk into an area and like something's weird, something's off, that can also be a huge indicator.
Absolutely.
So we're gonna start with chickens.
And I'll just say first, this applies to all the residents, is that I'm sure you were probably going to mention this too, but just the biggest thing is knowing what their normal is. And that's so important for every single resident here, knowing what their normal is.
Everybody.
Yes, in addition to knowing what's abnormal, because I guess you can't really know what's abnormal if you don't know what normal is.
Yes.
So yes, very, very important to know what's normal
for their
resident.
species, so how chickens normally act, and then for that individual. How Nancy might act might be a little bit different because he's elderly and has arthritis. If I came in and saw Brian acting like Nancy normally acts in terms of mobility and in terms of demeanor, I would be concerned, like Nicole said. So it's chickens generally, but then chickens as individuals, having just picking that up and just getting to know them really well. So that's why individualized care is super important, because we want to pick up on all those things and get the appropriate treatments and veterinaries involved. Veterinarians. Okay, chickens, that was kind of for everybody. If you walked into the coop and saw something off, what would be an example?
So I would be concerned if I saw someone huddled up in the corner, not engaging. So in like a nice, happy, healthy chicken, I would expect curious, bright eyes, no discharge, exploring the environment, interacting with either myself or other birds. Not every bird is going to be super excited to see us, but just exhibiting those
that's their individual
normal behaviors. A really, really huge red flag for birds, as we call it, penguin stance. When
Think
they're
of how a penguin stands, really upright. That's not how chickens stand normally.
Upright, puffed up, kind of hunched up. That's usually indicating, or it's always indicating, discomfort, pain. So that kind of gets our red flags going right away. A pale face, a floppy comb tends to indicate maybe something with circulation, or if they're not feeling super well. Definitely not eating. And then, of course, there's the obvious things like a wound. But really, the things that we're talking talking about now are kind of like the less obvious things, the behavioral things.
Yeah, because something like lameness where all of a sudden they're sore, but there's these other things that are can be a bit trickier. And also with not eating, not all the birds in Richard's group run up to the bowl and eat first thing in the morning. They might kind of be like, ew, the humans are here because they're going to hear. Dorothy's running the opposite direction because she's going to be getting medication. So I'm not like, I wouldn't be like, oh no, Dorothy's not eating, that's a problem. But if we get her in her own solo crate, we start to assess that way. Somebody like Nancy not eating is very different than Dorothy not eating. If we went in the morning, this has happened before, Nancy wasn't feeling well. I think a month and a half ago. Somebody, that's breed specific for chickens. So we're talking about chickens, but we're talking about Cornish crosses. Nancy's a Cornish cross. They have been bred to be hungry 24/7. If we put food down and he doesn't eat, he's getting rushed to the emergency vet. Hi, Sylvia. If you guys have any questions, we're talking about signs of illness and distress in the residents and how we assess those. Because they can be very subtle. And so many things we've picked up on because they have been like extremely subtle changes. So it's very important to keep an eye out for those we're
things.
using all of our senses all of the time and using the information that we have from the residents, what we know is normal, their routines, if routines are ever off. So we talked about chickens. I think we cover most chicken things. Then there's obvious discharge of the eyes, of the nose. You mentioned coloring changes in the comb and wattles.
Wheezy breathing.
Especially if it's out of nowhere. We know Ginger has a chronic respiratory issue, so if she's wheezing a bit in the morning, she's getting her medication. We're not rushing to the vet, but if anybody else is, that would be a concern. So there's so much that we're kind of going through our mental checklist with as we go do morning rounds, which is an important one because that's the first time we're seeing the residents in the morning. So I think that covers chickens. Trying to think if there's anything else.
There's 900 others.
There's so much else. Like how they relate to us, how they relate to each other. Let's do, who do we want to do next?
Is there anything specific for ducks?
I'm trying to think of ducks. Ducks are pretty similar to chickens in terms of how they... some of the ducks are a bit more flighty. We do have a mallard hybrid pair that I think they would be more difficult because if they're always running away from us...
I would have a much harder time. Agreed.
But hiding behaviors are pretty much with any of the residents. If they are not usually hiding and then all of a sudden they're hiding, that would indicate some kind of medical issue that we're just not seeing with our eyes internally. We don't have x-ray eyes, unfortunately, so we would be sending them to the vet for x-rays.
And especially for birds and rabbits, I would say as well, is usually by the time they're showing these signs that means that an issue has been going on for quite some time. They've been hiding it for a period of time and they've gotten to the point that, okay, I can't hide it anymore.
They want to hide.
And that's such like
instinctual.
Such a critical thing for being prey animals is because if there's something wrong with them, they're like literally biologically driven to hide it because they don't want to attract basically prey to the flock. And unfortunately, we see that sometimes with the birds. That's actually a good thing for birds, or a good thing to mention as well with the birds is sometimes we'll start to see the rest of the flock picking on another member of the flock.
How the flock is acting toward them, not just how they're acting to the flock.
Exactly.
They can tell. Sometimes the residents can tell us things before we know. And we've had that instance before. There's a very specific example of one of a duck. She's passed away since Daisy, but her sister started picking on her. It was out of nowhere, and we didn't really understand why. And she actually had kidney failure when we took her to the vet. So things like that. We're just always on high alert. All hours. I have our first question. If you have any questions while we're here chatting with you on Bear Care Corner, this is from Vicky. Does anyone live at the sanctuary to watch residents overnight? There's always people here 24/7 for the residents, regular staff, overnight staff. There's always people here ready. There's cameras, there's all kinds of alert systems, and there's all kinds of protocols for the manager on duty, for example, to step in or whoever needs to transport the residents.
Because we have had emergency middle of the night transports multiple times. So
think of a more, I wouldn't say recent at this point, a few months ago before the move, but rushing Ray to the emergency vet at midnight. So we have to be ready for that because emergencies can happen any time, not just during operational hours, not when the last caregiver clocks out. So that's, I think we covered birds generally.
Yes, very generally. Big disclaimer.
Let's go. So this is very topical. We had Elmer in to the emergency vet just over a week ago, and he spent most part of a week there. and Nicole took them, so she has a lot of experience with this.
Yes.
So we'll talk about goats and sheep. I think we can lump them together as small ruminants.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So behaviorally, we could talk about Elmer, I think, as an example to start with.
Yeah, absolutely. So Elmer, last Sunday, I went as I was working through morning rounds and feeding. So he tends to sleep overnight with Gilbert in the stall. They're both very excited for breakfast. On Sunday morning, literally within seeing him for half a second, I knew, something is not right. He wasn't climbing up on the gate like he normally is, so immediately my red flag started to go off. Then I noticed just his posture was very strange. His head was cranked up, or his neck and head were cranked up really high. He had this very kind of glazed over, they call it like stargazing look in his eyes. So he was acting very irregular. So I got him separate. Once I offered him breakfast, he didn't eat. And he is someone that eats his supplemental meals very vigorously. He's always very excited. He continued kind of with that very like stiff backwards neck. He seemed very dazed, an irregular gait. He was very stiff as well. So immediately I was like, oh, here we go. Got it on the phone with our vet right away. So thankfully we were able to do a quick assessment on him for kind of neurological signs. And apparently, or he did go blind. We suspect overnight as a result of a thiamine deficiency. So thiamine, vitamin B1, it's really important for so many things, but it has a lot to do with like important neurological functions. We're not sure why he got that deficiency, so we're still kind of working with our vet team to figure that out. But
it'd be good to know. We were watching all the other goats and sheep closely, but we just don't. The vets don't understand why that would happen so suddenly, unless there was a massive diet change, unless there was something so obvious. But there's been nothing obvious. We didn't change anything about his routine or his diet. We're still trying to figure that out because it'd be helpful to know.
Totally.
Tough not knowing those things, but sometimes you just don't.
Unfortunately. So for him, obviously he was not acting normal, but the signs specifically were pointing to neurological signs, like the lack of like a blink reflex. His pupils weren't dilating and constricting properly. We realized he was blind. So once we realized neurological, and the same thing with the movement, he was rushed to OVC. So thankfully he's doing better now. He's still on supplemental thiamine, but he's doing better.
Yes, much improved.
Yes.
And then Sylvia was just wondering what his diagnosis was. It was thiamine deficiency.
Yes, so that leads to goat polio, basically. So swelling in the brain.
In the process of recovering from that and on daily thiamine right now to get his levels back up.
And he's doing really, really well, we're happy to say. So Elmer, good example for knowing the normal for a resident, very eager in the morning. He loves his breakfast. All of the goats and sheep, as soon as we see them in the morning, they are absolutely ready to get started for the
even with
day.
his arthritis, he's up there,
climbing,
jumped up, ready to come out and eat his breakfast. And
very eager to eat.
Just excited.
Chewing their cud, drinking water, of course, eating hay. Everyone's always very excited for hay. So we're concerned when we see someone separating themselves from the flock, because they are flock animals. And of course, they still have their own individual characteristics. Like, Jeannie kind of likes lounging inside a little bit more.
She's like a grumpy old lady. So she's like, there's young kids running everywhere. But that's normal. We wouldn't go over there and really panic if we saw that necessarily.
Exactly.
Or Obama's a little bit more aloof, unless he wants to be. He's either super involved with everybody or he's doing his own thing. He's kind of, there's no in between with him.
So there's so many things about goats and sheep.
Dropping cud is
dental
one.
stuff.
So that would say something's going on with their jaw, or something inside of their mouth. Could be they need teeth floating, they need something done with their teeth. It's when they bring up their cud to chew it the second time. They chew their grass a few times. That's how they ruminate. But they bring it up, they start to chew it, and then it's just something's just not as too painful or whatever, and then they drop it. And drop cud looks very specific. It's like this little patty of partially chewed up hay or grass. And as soon as you see that, you're like looking. I remember Obama had that when we were checking the overnight cameras, and I was watching. He was chewing, and the cud just fell out of his mouth, and
like
he had some dental issues.
I
was like, there it is. It was like 4 a.m. I felt so proud of myself for finding that. So dropping cud, teeth grinding could be something dental, but it could also just be general pain.
Pain.
Anxiety or general pain. I mean, we do it. Think of just also think of yourself. Like, think
Yeah.
of how, like, you might display, you know, grimacing. Rabbits do that. If you pain, grimace, they actually, rabbits do that. And
face will tighten
it could be
up.
a little bit, like, a learning curve to see how they do it, but think of how you would feel, how you would, you know, if you're sore, if you're kind of hunched, if you're cold.
Yeah,
I mean, those two can
we're
look kind of
hunching a little bit now, but they're cold.
Exactly. And then with the chickens too, if you come in with a group of chickens that are kind of hunched, maybe the coop is cold versus they're all stiff. So it's kind of going through all those checklists.
Yeah.
Sylvia had one more question. Sorry if I missed any. They were running by kind of quickly. Is it more useful for animals to pick? Useful for animals to pick on a sick one or ignore them?
It's a good question.
I think it goes both ways.
Yeah.
I think it depends on the individual. It depends on the species. We've seen both.
Yeah.
Because it is scary for them if they see somebody in their flock sick that they're afraid that's going to attract prey, which is obviously not going to happen.
Yeah,
they're safe here.
Setting.
There's gates and everything in place for that not to happen. But that's just natural for them and that's their behavior. So I think I've seen both.
Yeah, and I think it also depends on the sick individual's like place in the hierarchy as well.
Yes, there's a lot of hierarchies, even chickens, pigs.
Yeah. I think that
Goats,
makes a difference as
do they
well.
have a hierarchy? They do.
Yeah, it's a little bit more like not as intense as the chicken or as the pigs, which is nice.
Yeah, chickens have a pecking order. They have a hierarchy, but it really depends on a lot of things. That's a really great question. Thank you, Sylvia. Again, if you have any questions, let us know in the comments. We'll try to catch them if they don't go by too quickly. Goats and sheep kicking at their stomach.
Yes,
could
GI
be a urinary.
discomfort.
Yeah, it could be GI. Could be their stomach. Something's going on. Sometimes you'll see that with bloat.
Yeah. Looking back even at their abdomen as well.
Yeah,
we see
like
that with horses too.
Yeah. So GI or urinary because they, especially a male, their prepuce is right on their right there. So they might be kicking because they are trying to urinate and it's painful, or they can't because they have a blockage. Weird noises. I remember I once walked into the barn and I heard this weird moaning noise and I was immediately, ready to jump in and Moose, a sheep that we used to have, it had bloat. So just hearing that, and it's like, that's not normal for him. It was just this weird noise. And he was experiencing bloat, which we fixed up with our vet. We had everything we need on hand. We have bloat kits.
Yes.
But hi everyone, thanks for tuning in. Goats and sheep.
Yeah.
Just like obvious things like lameness, if they're sore all of a sudden. We're just trying to think of behavioral.
I think separating themselves from the flock.
That's a big one.
Yeah, the stargazing, like with Elmer, and specifically even like facing in a corner. I remember when Diablo had a little bout of feeling not well earlier in the summer. That
he's pretty outgoing usually.
Yeah, and I remember
he wants to know what's going on.
Yeah, I remember coming in one morning and he was facing the corner, not eager for breakfast.
Yeah.
So again, immediately my alarms went off. He also kind of had that hunch posture. Yeah,
kind of weird. I remember one morning. We have so many memories.
Yes.
Let's relive them all here.
Yep.
Obama, he's usually like gives a long ways around us, like kind of, he kind of wants to be close for his fig Newtons, otherwise he's like, leave me alone.
Yeah.
So he takes a long way around us, and I went in the morning. He just took a second longer to run away from me than usual, and I was like, something weird is happening.
Yeah, you could just tell.
And he had an injury from overnight, and we checked the cameras and got him all fixed up, but I just knew, and you couldn't see it because of his wool.
Yeah, that's true.
Just a little bit, like the way he moved away from me, I was like, what are you doing?
Something's not right. Yeah.
What are you doing? I'm suspicious.
Yeah, and I think that's like, we talk about it all the time, but like that's such an important thing for knowing the residents normal, because it allows us to pick up on these very, very subtle things.
Yeah, we have these alarm bells going.
Yeah.
Or you'll come off your weekends sometimes. So we have caregivers here that are full-time and also part-time. So it's helpful to kind of have somebody every single day back to back to see changes, but then, I haven't seen a resident in 4 days or something, and you pick them up and they're lighter, or you see them and they look different. So that's also really helpful. Yeah. Vicky has a question. How did the residents adjust to the move? So we moved recently. If you're new here to the channel, welcome. We're in our new Bear Care Corner studio. Yes, I was gonna say station. Vicky's wondering how the residents adjusted move. Did some exhibit stress symptoms? I think we did.
We 1,000,000,000% did.
Yes.
We are shocked and thrilled to say that honestly, almost everyone took it really well. I would say the cats, like we expected, were probably the most stressed out.
Yes.
Right?
Just because they weren't too bad at the beginning.
Yeah, not as bad as I thought.
And they were excited to
worse.
get out.
Yes.
I think we do often plan for the worst, and we kind of have to.
Yes.
Just in case something happens, we want to be able to run into action. And if the pigs were experiencing stress, we have, the stress medication on hand. Like, that's so many things things on hand that we luckily didn't have to use any of them.
Yeah, incredible.
The cats did really well. I think the cats were, if they had any stress at all, it would be the cats. So it was just a little bit because they were eager to get out, but we wanted to make sure that they knew where home is, and now they're out and about and they get locked in every night. But I think I was most concerned, you might be too, of the pigs.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Pigs are very sensitive. They can be very dramatic. We were even concerned if we transported a pig in the morning and then a few hours later we transported another group. You know, sometimes when they don't see each other, even for a short amount of time, the hierarchies can change, and that none of that happened. So we did plan really well and
very extensively.
We did a great job. Good job, team.
Yeah, and I think it's helpful too that yes, we and the residents are in a new location, but they're with all of their herd mates. They're with the same humans.
See us.
They
Staff,
see
the
us. They
volunteers.
see their friends. Yeah, so I think that has helped a lot.
New smells, new sights, but then same routine.
Yeah, exactly. Same routine.
So I think that was really pigs. Feeding routine got changed
for the better.
It was for the better. They slept in every morning because they were getting used to this, and they didn't want to eat right away. And we've taken that and said, sure, let's keep that up. Speaking of pigs, I think we ran through most of the goats, and there's so many. I'm just like,
there's so much. We're just
weird little things that they're not usually doing.
Yes,
pigs.
Oh,
pigs. A little bit different than like Nicole mentioned with rabbits and chickens. Pigs do hide pain, depends on the individual, but they might be a little bit more eager to show you because sometimes they can.
Hercules.
I was just gonna say Hercules. Even if he's not, he's just like, oh, are you sure the vet doesn't need to see me?
Yeah,
they could be a little bit more dramatic.
Yes,
but it depends on the individual.
Yeah, totally. For me, when I think of like pigs in distress, my number one thing is if a pig's not eating.
Yes, we're
always
rushing them to the vet.
Yes.
There's no like, oh, let's try later.
Yeah.
You know, if Obama comes out and doesn't quite eat all of his breakfast, we're like, oh, it's a weird day, but let's mark it, and hopefully he eats later. And then if he doesn't eat later, you know, then maybe it's an issue.
Right.
He might eat a little handful and leave, and that's fine. He does that once in a while, but if a pig ever, and we've had this happen a few times, Hercules, unfortunately, way back in the day, I remember delivering dinner and all the pigs ran over, and it was summer, so they were way out, and I was calling them, but I remember he looked up at me, and then so he heard me, but then he looked right back down, and I don't tell Kevin, but I jumped the gate and I ran, and I was like, I didn't even know what was wrong at that point because it wasn't obvious, but just the way he was acting, we got the vet in, we were, you know, he ended up having a urinary blockage, just having to go to emergency, but so that was an instance of if we ever see that, we are not jumping gates or
sometimes you have to. Sorry, Kevin. But very similar with Brindle, actually early in the year when we rushed him to OVC. I feel like it was very early in January because I remember we started the new year off with a bang. I remember this year there was a lot of vet appointments, like the first week of the new year. Claudia was on New Year's Day. Claudia
had something going on.
Yes.
And was that urinary?
No, GI, but we still don't know why.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But very shortly after that, it was a similar thing. Brindle did not come to dinner. And knowing that Brindle has a history of urinary blockages as well as like very, very deep hoof abscesses as well, immediately we were concerned. So he was rushed to OVC.
And that could present either way. Like not eating could be urinary and not eating could be a hoof issue. Maybe they're too much in pain to come to dinner. Maybe they're afraid to eat because... thank you for your question, Helen. We're going over the piggies right now. Not eating is like one of the biggest ones for us, and pig emergencies, biggest red flag. Think of other things.
Yeah, I mean, lameness, like it's obvious, like we see someone limping or not fully weight bearing, then we're always concerned. So that always gets our...
It depends on how severe. It might be like, oh, they're kind of, maybe they twisted their ankle a bit at dinner. Are they okay the next day? Are they okay the next evening? And then if it continues to be in the notes, that's why we love taking all these notes.
Yes.
If that kind of is like, oh, okay, we got to get them up in the pig shooter. We have to do something about it. We have to assess if there's an abscess because that might require something under sedation that we might have to take them in for. So
and And sometimes there are things brewing and they won't even show us. Because I remember when we brought Brindle to OVC earlier this year, we initially suspected that it was a urinary blockage. Because I remember when he got up,
it looked really similar.
When we finally got him up and I saw him straining, and he did only like he had a little bit of urine, but not much. I was like, oh my gosh, we have another urinary blockage. Of course, he had a big great pee once he got to OVC, but he ended up having like another very, very deep abscess that was like all up in his coronary band.
Away.
Yeah,
they did 2 sets of radiographs. So you typically think 1 set of radiographs they'd find it and that's it. They found nothing on the first set, and I guess maybe we asked them, or they did it again in a few days because he hadn't improved.
Yeah, and he wasn't lame at all. Like he just presented all of a sudden not eating, and just. I also remember Braxton, just incidentally, a year ago maybe, we had her up in the pig chute just for like a regular routine
health
check.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and we were just trimming her hooves, and then there was a massive abscess in one of her back legs.
Right there.
I remember just like, how is she not lame?
Yeah,
like
she wasn't sore. There was nothing. You didn't even see it coming. All of a sudden, you're like, wow, there it is.
Yeah.
While you're doing trim, that's why trimming regularly is really important.
Yeah,
it's good. I think
things.
if we hadn't caught it then she would have maybe been sore the next day or a few days later, and then it would have been worse.
For sure.
Because those kind of things you want to deal with pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And some things we smell before we see.
Yeah,
I have lots of examples. I have a very sensitive sense of smell.
And we'll see the pig smelling injuries. That's a really good one.
Is really, they're doing like not just like, oh, sniffing my mom, going up, nuzzling. Like it's just very specific, like, oh, they're nosing it, like something's going on. They get really, and sometimes they'll do the phlegm response. If they're doing that, I'm like, it's not just a wound, it's usually an infected wound because they're reacting to that. So you'll see them do that. Sometimes it's an instance where the residents will show you before I remember one time I laid down with Tim for a belly rub and I was rubbing his belly and I was like, oh, I smell an infection. And it was his ear. His ear had a bite, an old one, but it was behind, so we couldn't see it right away, and it had gotten infected over a few days. So we got that all cleaned up. He was fine, but I just remember that specific instance. I was like, oh, I'm having this cute moment with Tim. Hang on.
And I think even more recently, Iona's tail, I think that's how Iona's tail injury was discovered as well, because I think Bailey noted that Helen was sniffing at it. And Bailey's like, oh, that's kind of weird. So and I'm pretty sure that's how that injury was noted as well. So
even though they don't
tell us a lot.
Say in words that we understand, they the sounds they make or the way they interact with each other can say a lot, and there's so much to learn.
Absolutely.
As you're working and as a caregiver or a volunteer, you start to learn these kind of things. And we get radio calls sometimes for volunteers. It might be like, hey, this is kind of weird, and we go over and check it out. Well, it's normal for them. We're like, oh wow, that is weird. Let's pull that pig aside and put them in their own stall so we can start to observe. I don't think there's any other pig things.
I would say like lameness and GI issues are kind of the number one big thing that we're concerned about, that we tend to see the most.
Feet issues.
They're
so prone to feet issues. They have these big bodies on these tiny little tiptoes.
And I think other than that, just kind of acting abnormally as well. Like we know all of them so well. We know what their routines are like, what their personalities are like. Like I think, if like Raymond didn't come into the barn first thing in the morning for a peanut butter sandwich, I think we'd be kind of concerned.
Or even a honk. Like I'll walk, it'll be dark and we're just starting to turn some of the lights on and starting to get Obama out because that's like the first thing we do in the morning. There's always little honks. Like I'm talking to you or I'm talking to myself and he honks back and I'm like, he's there. If we didn't see that, I would be a little bit concerned. Thank you for tuning in. We're going to be back. We're just doing a quick intermission and we'll be back to do a few more questions. If you have anything, let us know in the comments and we'll be back in 1. Welcome back. If you want to become a monthly donor to support Nancy's healthcare, you can head over to happilyeverafter.ca. He has a lot going on, as you can see from that slideshow. A lot of daily costs, monthly costs, a lot of vet costs. He's actually going in next week for his every 6 months, or a little bit more frequent actually. Especially specialty vet likes to see him quite frequently because of his advanced stage and everything he's been through. He's beat cancer twice. He has feather follicle issues. He has arthritis in many parts of his body. So
he's got a lot going on.
I see him. When's that? Next Tuesday?
Wednesday. Yeah, very exciting.
We'll keep you posted.
Yes.
And it's also Nancy's birthday coming up in a few weeks. We're going to have a very special birthday celebration for folks that have donated toward the Holiday Magic fundraiser and monthly donors. So if you become a monthly donor today, you'll be invited. You got the special Zoom link, and we're going to do a cake.
We are extremely excited.
We're getting
so excited.
Nicole's getting the decorations ready.
Yeah.
Nicole's on decoration duty.
We have many ideas.
There's going to be some exclusive content that you might not have seen before. So look forward to the announcement of that event. If you sign up for our newsletter, you'll be the first to hear. Follow us on social. We'll keep you posted because I am way too excited about that event. So we're going to wrap up with, I think we didn't talk about cows yet in terms of the signs of illness that they might show, which might be pretty similar, a lot of similar things to the other residents that we talked about. Yeah, really similar. Cows are also ruminants.
Yes.
So they might have some similar dropping cud.
Yeah.
Would be one of them.
Yeah. And then similar like bloat signs as well. GI upset. Yeah. So right now, like Pouty in Denver, they get hay. They get fed hay because the pasture is done for the season. So they're always extremely eager to get their meals. So if one of them was not eager, I'd be concerned. We're dealing with Denver's mobility and arthritis as he's aging, and he is a very big boy.
And that can change through the seasons too, and how his hoofs are doing. He's prone to hoof ulcers.
Yeah. So like when his mobility and his hoof issues were having flare-ups, we would notice he'd be a lot slower to come to meals, things like that. So we're always hoping that they will be eager to eat. They're a little bit more like elusive than the small ruminants and the goats and sheep. So, if Pouty's not running up to the gate to come see me without food, I'm not concerned. I'm like, oh, he's just, same with Denver. They don't really care. They're kind of more independent, which is fine. But yeah, any lameness, of course, we're concerned. And then the subtle signs, like Andrew was saying, like teeth grinding, dropped cud, inappetence,
how
looking
they're reacting
uncomfortable
to each other.
Even
grooming. It's how they bond socially. They'll groom each other. They'll groom themselves. How anybody's coat looks.
There's so many things we can talk about.
Things. Coat or feathers. If they're looking unkempt, if around the chicken's bum, they haven't been cleaning themselves because they should always be doing that if they're healthy. If they can't reach because they're kind of big like Nancy, that's a different story. Or if they have arthritis and they can't do the full, he has arthritis in his back. But how their coat looks, they're like, it's just not looking like it normally is. They're not grooming themselves. That's a sign. Be a sign for the cats, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cats.
Absolutely.
We didn't talk about the cats.
Oh yeah.
Just keep going. We're here with everybody. Let's chat for a few more minutes.
Yeah.
One specific example I had was urinary issues, which we've had a few times, a few instances of, and I remember watching Claudia squat to pee because that's what you got to do as a caregiver.
Yes.
You watch a lot of things like that, and you train the new caregivers to do the same.
Always important.
And then not even 5 minutes later, she did it again. And that's, when they release a stream of urine, they shouldn't have to go again in 5 minutes. So she was just peeing a little bit, and then she had to end up having UTI, which is treated and she's fine. But that was an indication, that specific behavior, that triggered my, thinking of something was wrong.
Not right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then Enrique, I mean, he kind of goes through phases. You never quite know what to expect with him. Sometimes
he was just here.
He's very cute and cuddly.
Sweet.
Other times he's a little bit more feral. Claudia's over there in the sunshine. I remember in the summer, I think, when Enrique had the abscess on his face, when he was scrapping with some mystery cat at the old property. But a couple days before that really fully revealed itself as a swollen face, he was acting like he would not let anyone touch him.
That was
He was
weird.
hissing more than usual. So like occasionally we do kind of see, he's an independent guy with a unique personality. So like,
very unique.
Yeah. So occasionally, you never really know what to expect with him. But the fact that he was acting like that, like,
And it was consistent. It wasn't just like a one-off. Like he hissed by accident.
Yeah, exactly. So it was like a couple of days of him being cranky, and then all of a sudden his face was super swollen with an
that's
abscess.
what it is.
So and we're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, the cats are pretty good at hiding pain and discomfort as well. Enrique
really good.
He's quite sucky, so I think he's pretty good at letting us know now.
Even if you pick them up and they kind of yelp, like why did that happen? If they don't normally, sometimes Enrique tells us off because he doesn't want to be held. But if you know your cat at home, if you have a cat or a dog, or you know how they normally behave, or the sounds they normally make, or what they normally do, and all of a sudden it's a bit different. Their bathroom routines or their eating routines. That's definitely a sign to probably go to the vet.
Yes.
Write all those notes in your daily animal care note document that you have at home.
Right?
Yeah, I think we should do a bear care where we just show people how to set one up. That's a document we've created years ago, and it just contains every note and every detail and all the medications.
Yes,
we've showed folks a few times, just kind of scrolling through, and that's our what we go off of for the day.
For our day. Yeah. We love it. Keeps us organized.
I think we did everybody.
Equine?
Equine! I was missing something. I was trying to think like groups of where they're located on the property. I was circling back around.
Yeah.
Equine.
Yeah.
Nicole knows a lot about equine.
Yeah, well, so equine, they're not ruminants like like some people might think. Oh, they're like big grass-eating animals, but they are not.
Not quite.
Yes, not quite.
Well, not even really. No, not even close. I mean, not quite. They definitely don't ruminate.
They do a little bit of like hind-gut fermentation in their large intestine, but not to the extent that like a rumen and
they're
that
not
a
bringing
ruminant.
up a cud.
Exactly. Yeah, their digestive system is like a little bit different than like a human or a pig, which are the same, but still, yes. So the equine, we always want to make sure that they're hungry as well, which they are. So they get meal-fed hay as well, because our pasture is done for the season, and just to keep a close eye on their weights. Unfortunately, Escalade is a little bit underweight, BJ is a little bit overweight. So as you can imagine, with that very bonded pair, it's something a little bit awkward to deal with, but it's doable, but they're always excited for their meals. So if they weren't, we would be concerned.
Yeah, if we drive in the morning, BJ first thing is yelling at us, wants his hay before we do anything.
Yes.
If he's not doing that, I would be concerned if I didn't hear him braying at us.
Yes, and reminding me of when BJ was a little bit lame earlier in the summer. So I remember that morning he was not super excited for breakfast, and he was just acting like very, very strange and not like him. So we ended up bringing him into the barn. We saw him laying down and rolling more than usual as well. So that's a pretty big red flag.
Kind of not dust bathe. Well, kind of in a sense.
It is, yeah.
So they do it a bit, and they scratch their backs and they play around. But doing that more could be the opposite of fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because a lot of the times with equines like horses, donkeys, they can get colic, which is kind of just like a general term for GI upset. It can kind of be about a lot of different causes for it. But a lot of those classic colic signs are like inappetence, rolling around because they feel uncomfortable, kind of trying to work through that, pawing at their abdomen, and same thing, kind of like looking back, the awkward stretching. So when I remember when we saw BJ that morning, he's like a little bit uncomfortable, like, and not super eager for food. And I was like, okay, are we feeling colicky or are we feeling sore? And then I saw that he was quite lame on, I don't remember, I think front left. He did not want to run away from me, which normally he loves doing that. So with BJ, we were quite concerned about laminitis. He has increased risk of laminitis because he is fortunately a bit overweight. So that's something that we have been aware of and dealing with for years now, managing it with his diet and hoof trims as well. So with laminitis, it's like a very, very painful condition that they get in their hoof that if this is like the side view of a hoof. There's the lamina right here, which is like the very sensitive tissue that's just underneath the hoof wall. And that can actually become inflamed. It's very painful. They get very lame. If it gets bad enough, it can actually cause one of the bones in their hoof to rotate. And once it's at that point, there's not much you can do. So something that we're always looking out for him. So I saw BJ not really wanting to eat, not walking that well. His foot felt hot and swollen. So immediately I was like, oh my gosh.
Swelling.
So we brought him into the barn. Thankfully, it was not laminitis. It ended up being most likely a hoof abscess, but not a pretty big one. Because I remember,
yeah, because we got a hoof trim.
Soaks.
Yeah, we did hoof soaks, and then the vet
Yeah.
and the farrier, and everybody kind of got involved, and it cleared up on its own, but without any kind of abscess bursting.
Not obviously.
Everyone was wondering how old BJ is. Do you remember off the top of your head?
No.
It's in our database.
Close to 20,
Yes.
right?
I
Yeah.
think he's 20 or 21, and Escade's about the same age.
Yes.
Thank you for that question, Helen.
Yeah.
We're pretty sure. We'll check the database.
Yeah, we'll consult.
Now
with
that
our
all this
records.
information's in the database, we don't keep it out here because we need room for other things.
For other things.
Like everything we're just talking about.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah, so GI stuff for the equine for sure, and dental stuff as well, dropping cud, not
Or just
wanting
doing
to eat.
weird, like grinding.
Yeah.
Any kind of swelling, like
Yeah.
Jeannie's face.
Yeah.
And going back to Jeannie if we're talking about everybody, but
Yeah.
so we use a thermal imaging camera so that can see things that maybe our eyes can't see. Sometimes you're holding, like you want to hold a hoof and see if it's swollen. It can be hard to tell. Is it just because they were just laying on it? Is my hand warm?
Yeah,
sometimes you can feel it, but we use a thermal imaging camera that can maybe show a bit more localized, like, oh wow, that one area is super hot. Is there an abscess? So
yeah, it's a great
tools
part
that
of
we use
toolkit,
as well.
yes.
We can go on about that for the rest of the afternoon. I think we covered most things, and there's definitely way more. But it just kind of gives you a general sense of the signs of illness that we might see in the residents. Some things that we look out for as we're working through our days. We're always on alert. Like, what was that? What was that weird noise? There was sneezing. There was coughing. Is that normal? Did they just get a bit of straw up their nose, or is there a respiratory issue? Gonna have to figure those things out and be a detective at all hours.
Yes, a very long list. Yeah, and again, like, this was such an excellent question that someone left us a couple weeks ago. Like, we were so excited to talk about it.
Really excited.
As you can see, there's so much. Like, again, we've it's like
the
tip of the iceberg.
We get nerd out on.
Yes,
and we're very happy to share back with everybody here in our Bear Care Corner community.
Yes.
Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you for supporting the residents, and we're excited to see you again next week. Bear Care Corner on Tuesday, and we'll also be Fireside, we'll also be Barnside. We're going to see you all over the place. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.